Hey everybody, it's Dr. May. So we've reached lesson 25 in sensory motor psychotherapy, which is the last new lesson. Okay, I'm going to do one summary video after this, but this will be the last new skill. But it's ending on a very good and positive note. It's about expanding our window of tolerance by learning how to take healthy risks and incorporate new and more exciting and enlivening things into our life. So it's a great way to move forward and a great way to end our moving forward section. Okay, so let's get this going. Okay, here we go. All right, so challenging our window of tolerance. So we're going to start with a brief review. Okay, so we have been talking about window of tolerance throughout the curriculum, and there was an earlier lesson specifically about the window of tolerance, but I just want to solidify this concept since it's kind of the theme for this lesson. Okay, so the window of tolerance, if you look in the diagram to the left, is that green section in the middle, and it represents our comfortable arousal zone. So it's when we feel not too over aroused and not too under aroused. We feel kind of comfortable and at ease. And we feel like when we're in that zone, we could interact well with other people and the world and function. And it's kind of like we really want to expand that window and be in that zone more often, so that we could live our life in a more comfortable way, okay? And it involves tolerating and being present both with distressing feelings and pleasurable emotions. So you have a greater range of the things you're able to be with without losing control. And it gives you more freedom just to navigate through life when that's the case. So that's why it's one of the reasons why we're going to work on this more today, okay? So when we grew up, if we were lucky enough, we had a family that helped to foster a wide window of tolerance. And if we had responsive caregivers that didn't let us get too overexcited and stay there too long, or get too under aroused and stay there too long, and help to regulate us and bring us back into our window, we chances are learn how to incorporate those competencies ourselves. Okay, so let's look at the examples here. So if you look at the pink arrow, okay, so it's high arousal, but still safety. So our caregivers may have been able to join with us in pleasurable high arousal activities, but if they saw we were getting too wound up, running around, getting a little too out of control, they knew how to bring us back and how to soothe us and comfort us to calm us back down again into the middle of the window. All right, similarly, if we look at the bottom blue diagram there, if we had responsive caregivers, they were able to relax with us and help us enjoy low arousal states, such as the mother reading a book to her daughter. But if she saw, let's say our mother saw that we got too low and we got too blah, she knew how to pick us back up again and maybe play a game with us or do something that kind of brought us back up into the window. All right. So next, though, chances are if you're joining me today in this video, you may not have a super wide window of tolerance at this time. Okay, just maybe not yet, right? So we might have had circumstances where we grew up that fostered a narrow window of tolerance, so that there wasn't a lot that kept us comfortable, and it just took a certain type of experience or a person or emotion to bring us into hyperarousal or hypoarousal. And it wasn't a whole lot we were able to tolerate comfortably. And obviously that makes it much more difficult to get through our lives in a functional manner when that's the case. So circumstances that foster a narrow window of tolerance include, all right, abuse, clearly, okay, attachment figures or caregivers that didn't help us regulate our emotions. So maybe ones that let us get too out of control and too hyper-aroused, or saw us get hypo-aroused but didn't really help bring us back up and just kind of let it go. Or were in fact the causes of these states and never taught us how to re-regulate, okay? Neglect, not getting adequate attention. Loss, okay, which is traumatic in itself, such as the death of a parent or abruptly moving, or you're in the military family and you're moving a lot. Maybe just examples for, sometimes that could be very difficult. Painful divorce. Also, if you had parents that focus mostly on pressures to achieve and excel. Sorry, I got those vowels mixed up there. So if you were constantly pressured, you might always be on edge, always just trying to do the right thing and just kind of walk that fine line to be okay. Whereas other experiences may not have been okay. Okay. Okay, all right. But even if that's the case, even if because of your upbringing, you had a narrower window of tolerance, it's still possible to expand it now. And some of the other lessons, such as lesson 11, which introduced the window of tolerance, as well as other lessons to follow, we learn techniques for expanding our window of tolerance. All right. So examples of that include how we learn to regulate high and low unpleasant emotions, such as by using our resources and coping skills. And also learning to allow more high and low arousal emotions, both negative and positive. So when you're more accepting of your emotional experience and you don't react to the fact that you have emotions, it helps keep you in that window of tolerance. When we talked about the orienting response in an earlier lesson and a couple others to follow, we learned how to orient to things in our environment and focus on things that help to re-regulate us. So instead of, let's say, focusing on things that felt the most threatening and anxiety provoking, we learned to orient to other cues, other people that helped us feel better. And so expanded what we knew we could choose to look at. And even within ourselves, sometimes there's certain sensations or thoughts or emotions within ourselves that we focus on that make us feel dysregulated. But we learned that we could also focus on other building blocks and other experiences within our building blocks that are more regulating. So just where we place our attention in itself could help expand our window of tolerance. And also we learned about our building blocks and that using our mindfulness skills to break down very overwhelming experiences by focusing on one building block of them at a time helps them to feel more manageable. So if I feel just a whole mess of things and just really upset and out of control, what if I just focused on my breath? That one piece of it, that could make it a little bit easier to handle, right? And it simplifies it and helps it feel like I could have some more control in a positive way. So we also explored our resource repertoire. We explored both somatic resources as well as those other 9 resources listed below in those little mini squares there. And when we developed our resources, we used them to bring us back into our window of tolerance, especially when we noticed that we were getting dysregulated. And we learned how to change our procedural patterns, such as our ways of interacting with the other people in the world and our habits of just being with the world. We noticed what those were and tried some new actions and new body postures and new resources that helped us to re-regulate. Okay, so we realized, oh, this pattern I'm in is kind of reinforcing me getting out of my window. Let me try something new. And this new pattern helped me stay in my window. So all that stuff we've already covered. So today we're going to introduce something new. So we're going to learn to expand our window of tolerance by taking healthy risks. So by balancing safety and novelty in a healthy way, we learn how to expand our window by bringing in new positive things into our life. And it kind of just enriching us by trying new things, exposing ourselves to new people, and being our best self in brand new ways. Okay, so we're going to talk about the dialectic of safety and novelty. So we'll start with safety. All right, so clearly we all have an inborn need for safety because it's a survival thing, right? When we're safe, we're able to live and survive in a comfortable way. So not just physical safety, but also emotional safety. We have a need for protection, security, predictability, right? Knowing what my routine is helps me feel safe, deep relaxation, and belonging. When I feel like I'm part of a tribe, I feel like there's safety in numbers, I'm cared for, I'm protected, I'm loved, and that helps me to feel safe. Okay. But sometimes, we get too safe. Things get too much the same, too predictable. We avoid risk too often, and our life gets dull. It gets boring and uninteresting. And we're just focused on staying safe, but we're not enriching it. And it prevents us from growing, making progress, and just, feeling like we're living our best life. And sometimes we have even limiting beliefs that keep us in that mode. So some examples I have here below. You might even think, I'm never going to be safe. Like I always have to be vigilant just to try to be safe because it's never really going to happen for me consistently. Or it's not okay to make mistakes. Taking risks involve the potential of making mistakes. And if I feel like I can't handle that, I might never take risks or avoid it like the plague. What about I don't deserve to succeed. Taking a risk to do something better might be like, okay, well, what if I do succeed and then I don't deserve it? What's the worst thing for me about getting something that I don't deserve? It almost feels like it could be dangerous because maybe in my past it was. Or I'm not capable, I'll just fail. What if I try to do something new and then it just doesn't work out for me? You know, I work really hard. I try to build my relationships. I try to work in a new way. I try to do something and then I just fail. What if I can't handle the pain of that? Maybe it's better just to stay the same, even if the same isn't that great. You see how that goes? I know a lot of people out there probably can relate to this because I hear this in my clients all the time. All right. Another thing, in addition to our thoughts, our old procedural learning, our movement habits, our emotional habits keep us stuck in old patterns that are familiar, but, you know, lead us to avoid healthy challenge and risk. Keep us in those old stuff that may not work for us very well anymore. All right, so let's flip it to the other side of the dialectic of novelty. So novelty obviously means new stuff. So we also have a natural need for risk, excitement, and unpredictability, right? Think about in the old survival days of tribes, if they didn't try something new, if they didn't hunt for their food in a new place, or try new ways to build tools, primitive tools, or grow crops, they wouldn't have survived. They had to try new stuff and to, you know, expand their repertoire because the same thing over and over again wouldn't have led to survival. So we have a need to try new things, right? And so when we, you know, encounter new things, it forces us to grow. It leads us to learn new things about ourselves, about the world, about others. All right. But sometimes this could go overboard too. Just like we could be way too safe, we could crave novelty way too much. You might become like an adrenaline junkie or a major risk taker and do things impulsively that end up getting you in trouble. So you might have an association with novelty of, oh man, the last time I did something crazy and, you know, this bad consequence happened to me. So I'm not sure, I'm a little risk averse now because I don't know if I want to get into that again. All right. But there still is a safe way to do novelty or safer way, right? A way of thinking through the consequences and taking wise choices when we're still trying to take a risk. Okay, so middle ground. I kind of started to give you hints of that already. So let's look at the way I set this up. So we have safety on the left, we have novelty on the right, and we could toggle back and forth between the two. We don't have to stay stuck on one or the other. And if we need to re-regulate as we try these different things, we could always go down and use our resources, which we've learned in previous lessons. Okay, so we could practice taking appropriate risks and seeking novel activities and pursuing new adventures. All right, and risk doesn't necessarily have to mean danger. It doesn't have to mean failure. Okay, and we could just explore, we could think it through before we take a risk. We don't have to just do it impulsively without thinking. We could think of potential outcomes and consequences, the pros and the cons. And then when we take the risk and we can tolerate it, it slowly helps to expand our window of tolerance because it feels a little uncomfortable. We're staying with it and we're trying it anyway. So when we can tolerate those uncomfortable feelings as we take the risk, it helps us to expand the window, right? And bring more into our life without losing control. All right, so I threw in a radically open DBT term for this one, even though I got the questions from sensory motor psychotherapy. So, you know, got to put it all together. So self-inquiry for risks and challenges. So self-inquiry basically means asking yourself questions to help you open your mind to something and think about stuff a little more carefully. So I'm going to go over these questions with you just to get you to reflect. And if you want to journal about some of these, that might be an interesting exercise as well. Even though this isn't the exercise section, you could always feel free to do some self-reflection. Okay, so if you could become your best self, the person you would want to be, what capacities or skills would you have that you don't have now? Okay, so when we're talking about moving forward, in this moving forward section, it's about moving toward my best self, not just recovering from all the problems and getting to a mediocre self. That was before. Now we're kind of mastered some of the trauma. We've mastered some of the troubles we've had, and we're expanding and growing in a more positive, empowered way. All right, next one. Is there some activity you have always wanted to do that you've been afraid to undertake? Would you behave differently in your life than you do now? What would it be like to just be, to do nothing instead of being busy all the time? That could actually be what they call a low arousal challenge. Sometimes the safest thing has been just to be busy, just to keep accomplishing, keep doing. And so the risk would be to do less. And that might feel a little scary. And it can expand your window in the lower end. All right, so the next three have to do with relationships, because sometimes the risks and challenges we take could help us improve our relationships and our role in our relationships. So how would you be different in your close relationships if you were to become your best self? Is there a risk you might take with someone you're close to that could deepen your connection? And do you wish to spend more time with friends? So the safer thing might have been sometimes to avoid certain social interactions, maybe due to fear of rejection or fear of failure or fear of intimacy. But what would it mean to take a risk and maybe get a little closer to people or the people you want to get closer to? Okay, so imagine alternative ways of being or visualizing yourself as becoming more the person you would like to be. And doing this can actually generate more meaning in your life. It can help you define what's important. And it can even expand your window, right? Just give you ideas of how that could happen for you. All right, so this is a great reflection exercise. So I definitely would encourage this one. All right, so here's some tips for taking healthy risks. So this is great to know if you're one of the people who tended to cling to safety because it felt safe and were afraid to take a risk, or even the person who took way too many impulsive risks and had some negative consequences. So this is kind of like, how do we get to that middle ground? So we can notice when old patterns of procedural learning interfere with our ability to navigate challenges and explore new possibilities. So let's say even starting to think about taking a risk, I already start to tighten up and clam up, and that physical posture tries to make me feel safe, but also prevents me from getting out there and doing something new. It kind of reinforces this idea that it's not safe to take a risk because I'm holding myself in very tight. So I can learn to inhibit that and kind of have more of an open posture and an openness to new things. I could also mindfully recognize the urge to engage in my usual behaviors, which are my old habits, which might feel safe, but still might not be working for me. Right. So I have some clients I work with that regularly engage in self-injurious behaviors or destructive patterns in their relationships or aggression. And it's like their old go-to. It's a familiar way of being. And they're not particularly happy with it, but it's also very scary to let go of that and think, well, what would my life be if I just didn't have that? What would it mean for me if I was functioning? You know, how would it be if I had to be more responsible in my life or take a more independent role? You know, and that's something new. Even though it sounds very good on paper, there's some frightening aspects to it. So it's easier even to stay with the unhealthy stuff right now sometimes than to take the risk of moving toward health, because it's also the worry thoughts of what if I can't do it and all that stuff. All right, so I could inhibit that procedurally learned impulse and intentionally try something new without overwhelming myself. Okay, so even though my impulse is to avoid it and to tighten up, I could inhibit that impulse. I could recognize what I'm doing and try to do opposite action and do it anyway. All right, so let's look at the bottom here. So we got to remember that no matter what, no matter how much you prepare yourself or how much you go over these skills, you're still going to feel some uncomfortable feelings when you're taking a risk. So you're never going to be completely comfortable and you're never going to guarantee success. There's always the risk of failure and making mistakes. So if you're really afraid of that, I would try to examine that. What's that all about? In my history, was it really a problem to make mistakes? What was I really criticized or yelled at or, made fun of, or, I risked losing the love of my caregiver if I made a mistake. And is that still with me now and holding me back? Okay, we got to explore what's getting in the way sometimes so that we could put it aside and still be willing to move forward. All right, benefits of taking healthy risks. So just to inspire us, we got to remind ourselves of, why am I going to bother trying to be uncomfortable doing this new thing? All right, so when I do that, It helps me to learn how to expand my window of tolerance clearly and tolerate a greater range of emotions, both positive and negative, right? So there might be some excitement about doing something new, but there also might be some fear. There might be some potential shame because, like, what if I humiliate myself and I can't handle it? And then I just look like a fool, right? So all those things are things I might have to deal with and work through in the process of taking my risk. But it also brings a sense of vitality, vibrancy, and joy of learning into our lives, and enables us to live life more fully and richly. And it helps me put aside some of my negative patterns because these are great things to reach toward. I'm not just pulling out the weeds, I'm planting flowers. When I put some of these positive things into my life, I feel like I have something new that I can hold on to that's good and positive for me. Another benefit, develops areas of our life we may have neglected and expand our personal and professional horizons. So there might have been stuff I put aside in the past because my life got in the way, but I could bring those back and bring back that joy again and expand what I'm able to do with my life and maybe brings more fulfillment to me and meaning. And finally, when you make mistakes in the course of taking risks and recover from those mistakes, you're able to grow and build resilience, right? So resilience is the art of bouncing back. So if I make a mistake and I can bounce back from the mistake, that helps me feel like, all right, I could handle it. I don't have to narrow my window to only safe things. If it's unsafe, I know I could survive it. Just like in relationships with your parents, with rupture and repair. If there's a problem and there's a rupture in the relationship, but the parent helps you repair it, you believe that you could survive problems in relationships and you could still going, even if there was an argument or even if there was a rift. So it gives you confidence in your life. And when you take risks and it doesn't go well, but you survive it, that I could try new things and it'll be okay, even if it doesn't always work out. Okay, so we came to the exercises. So here we go. So we're going to expand on this idea of your best self. So we're going to incorporate some building blocks here into the questions. So how does your body look and feel if you imagine embodying your best self? So if you're doing that reflection like we talked about earlier, and you tuned into your body, what are you feeling? And how do you move or want to move when you do that? And what's different about the way you usually feel? Like maybe there's some opening, maybe there's some pride or some bigger, better posture. Maybe your breath is different. Maybe you feel like more flow in your movements when you imagine being your best self. Okay, so just think about what changes when you imagine it. What activities do you see yourself participating in that you're not engaged in currently? What new things are in your repertoire in your day? What beliefs would you have about yourself, others in the world, if you were your best self? So how would that transform your whole view of things and give you a new template of core beliefs if you were to just be your best? Now, we're talking about more relationship things. How would you be different in your interactions with people if you were your best self? And how might others respond to you differently? So if you're carrying yourself differently, if you're feeling more confident, if you're able to engage in more different kinds of things, it affects the way you come across and it affects the way people see you and respond to you. And then, of course, we have to examine the obstacles. So what holds you back from becoming your best self? Because if it was that easy, we would have just done it, right? Because obviously there's things that we're a little afraid of. There's parts of ourselves that jump in and may say things like, well, you don't deserve it, or it's going to be too hard, or you'll never make it. So we got to examine what holds you back. Then describe 3 steps you could take on the road to becoming your best self. Okay, because you can't go from 0 to 100. We have to have all the little steps in between. So what are just a few small things you could do to get yourself started? Realistic steps. Then what somatic resources could you practice to support the steps you identify in number 6? So how would my body have to change to allow for those new things I want to do? Would my posture have to change? Would my breathing change? Would I have to feel more grounded, more centered? Would my arousal levels have to be regulated in terms of my 5 senses more so that I could feel comfortable to take these steps? Okay, so feel free to explore some of the somatic resource sections to refresh these if you need to. Okay, so we're on to the next exercise. So this one's called Expanding Your Window, Low Arousal Challenges. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes the challenge is to relax more, not to do more. You might be very good at doing, but struggle with relaxing. So we're going to reflect on first 3 times in your life when you did challenge the lower edge of your window of tolerance. So maybe what are some times when you explored quiet states, maybe took a relaxing vacation or meditation course, or you did yoga, or you sat quietly and wrote in a journal, or you're able to express, tender or vulnerable feelings to someone, or you're just cuddling with a child or a pet, or maybe you just took a mental health day off of work. And what was that like? How did that impact your building blocks, such as your emotions? How did you feel when you do that? What were your body sensations like? And how did it affect your movements? And then think about those events and what were some positive and negative elements of them? There might have been some negative too. You might have, not felt 100% yourself, or might have been a little challenging, right? So what were some goods about them? What were some bads about them? And then how could you use that memory to build confidence to try it again? So think about, maybe focus on more of the good stuff and more of the things that motivated you to do it, or more of the things you want to recapture, and use that now to put it back in your life. Okay, just explore how that could work for you. All right, so now we're going to flip it around and we're going to talk about high arousal challenges. Okay, so similar, we're going to explore 3 times in our life where we challenge the upper edge of our window of tolerance. So maybe I gave a toast at a wedding, even though I'm afraid of speaking in public. I kind of just did it anyway. Or maybe I tried something, learned something new. I took a new class, either an in-person or even an online class. Or I learned something difficult. Maybe I'm not really a math person, but I decided to sit down and improve my math skills, for example. Maybe I explored an intimate relationship and that was kind of hard. Or maybe I risked being honest with somebody and shared some feelings I'm not used to sharing. And so I challenged the anxiety of that in order to do it. I did opposite action, the DBT term, so to speak. All right, so again, we're going to explore when I think about those times when I challenge my high arousal, and it could obviously be other things, not just these examples. What was I feeling? What was my body sensations like? And what were my movements like? Then what were some positive and negative elements of those experiences? And how can I use the memory of those to maybe inspire me to try to put it back in my life again, right? You can get that confidence going. Okay, so now we're going to look at, this is just the intro page here. So we talked about creative resources. So these are resources you can use when you're not in a threat situation. Survival resources are things we just happen to come across, we happen to figure out when we were threatened in order to survive. Creative resources are things we could use more deliberately in a positive, healthy way to, also help us regulate and expand our window. So in each of these categories, we're going to think about how could I take new risks in each of these categories to help expand my window of tolerance. And then if I'm willing, if you're willing, try some of these things out and then, think about how it impacted your body. Okay. So if you want more information about these resources, we did explore them originally in lesson 14. But in that lesson, we were just trying to take inventory where we were thinking about what resources I already have in each of those categories and which ones did I have before that I could just bring back out again. So it was just kind of like bringing them back fresh into my mind so I could acknowledge them and then use them more. Okay. This one has to do with expanding those resources by actually doing new things in each category. So I'm trying new stuff, but I'm kind of breaking it down to categories to make it a little easier to think about. All right, so we're going to go category by category and take some notes if you need to. Just think of some ideas, or maybe even if I don't say something, a new idea pops in your mind that gives you an idea of something you want to try. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these just because sometimes you hear something and it sparks an idea. So first, relational risks. So it can include things such as reaching out to somebody, maybe a new acquaintance, maybe somebody you just met and you took the initiative to call them or text them and say, hey, you want to hang out. Tell someone who intimidates you how you feel, perhaps instead of avoiding it. Ask someone out on a date. If you're single, hopefully, take a risk to be vulnerable, especially if you're not used to that. Set a boundary with someone that you previously haven't done so with. Strike up a conversation with someone you don't know. Okay, maybe even standing in line at the store, perhaps, right? Apologize to someone. That could be a challenge, right? Especially, admitting you did something wrong, not always easy. Form a new friendship, or maybe even get a pet, right? So the relationship could even be with an animal. It doesn't even always have to be with a person. Somatic risks, all right, risks that have to do with our body and the way we use our body. Trying a new sport, dance or yoga class, challenging yourself in your exercise routine. If you're very motivated, training for a marathon, although, don't feel obliged, that's kind of quite an undertaking, right? Standing tall with someone you used to slump around, right? What if you showed them I was a little more confident, right? Instead of like, okay, right? Maybe that'll shift things a little bit. Relax your body or reach out during an argument. Okay, so instead of getting all armored up, what if you were to like soften a little bit? What would that be like? Take time to relax in a hammock if you have one. Do nothing. Get a massage. Okay. All right, emotional risks. All right, so this is like expanding our window by expanding the amount of emotion we're allowing ourselves to feel and express. So what if we express emotions that we're not as comfortable expressing? We're not going to express just our go-to emotions, but what are extra ones? Like, let's say my go-to emotion is anger, and I'm very good at expressing anger, but this time maybe I want to express vulnerability, or I want to let someone know I'm a little sad. That could be brand new for me. Be more emotionally open with your family. Show more tenderness or passion. Be assertive in a situation where you're usually passive. Can take some courage there for sure. Allow yourself to be with painful emotions, perhaps instead of acting them out or running away from them. Express more playful or positive emotions, which is just what we talked about in lesson 34. All right, intellectual risks. Okay, this could be especially challenging if you've struggled in school or you've had negative experiences in the classroom with grades or with parents criticizing your grades, right? This could be a big triggering area for some people. Or if you had a learning disability, right? So what if you were to go to a lecture on a topic you don't know a lot about, or you just learn something new, maybe a new skill, learn and use new words, read a challenging book, go back to school, right? For some of us, that might be a big undertaking, but maybe something we've always wanted to do. Write a paper and submit it for publication. Play demanding brain games. I don't know, maybe download one of those Lumosity apps or something like that. Start or join a study group or book club. Watch a documentary. Research a topic and teach someone about it. Okay, I'm doing it right now. Volunteer as a tutor to students or senior citizens, and learn a new computer program or app. All right, especially I know some people like my mom's age, learning something brand new on the computer is very a little scary for them, but very exciting when they figure it out. They feel like, yeah, all right, I learned the Amazon Fire Stick or whatever, right? It feels good to learn something new, and maybe you're always afraid that you would never understand it, but now you figured it out, right? Boost your morale a little bit. All right, artistic risks. Okay, have you ever been one of those people that just say, well, I just can't draw, or I'm just not artistic, right? We all have a creative impulse. Life is creation, right? Anything new that we put together and bring out there is part of creation. We can expand our definition of it. And sometimes we're more artistic than we think if we get over the fear of not doing it right. So what if you were to take an art or creative writing class, even in a local place like your library? Learn how to make pottery, take up a musical instrument. And believe it or not, there's even apps about how to do that. So you could even do it on your own if you're not comfortable yet getting a teacher. Go to a concert, poetry reading, play, or art show you typically wouldn't attend. So it might even be a matter of appreciating art in a new way, even if you're not creating it yourself certain times. Learn a new artistic medium to work in. Write a poem or story. Perform a musical piece or enter an art show. That might be a little more advanced for some of us, right? Join a theater group, or redecorate your house. Okay. All right. So next, nature risks. So what if we planned a new nature adventure? Maybe you tried a hiking trip that you never hiked before, and you're going to go hiking. Or maybe you've been hiking, but now you're going to try rock climbing. What if you tried whitewater rafting? Something brand new. went camping for the first time, or went fishing, or maybe you haven't done it since you were a kid. Climb a mountain. Start a blog about your experiences in nature. Could be fun to write about, I'm sure, right? Volunteer to clean up a natural area. I've done that, and it's actually a great experience. They've had sometimes volunteer groups that clean up garbage along the highway, and you really feel good when you're done. It's like it looks so much cleaner, and you feel like you really contributed and brought things back to nature. So just from personal experience, I'll share that one. All right. Grow your own vegetables or houseplants. That could be kind of fun. And even join a bird watching group. Okay. Next. All right. We got some more categories going. So material risks. It has to do with money and or material things. So what if we were to make a budget or a financial plan for yourself or your family? Maybe if you had problems with spending or debting, this could be a big challenge. Apply for a new job or position. Purchase something you wouldn't normally let yourself buy. Maybe treat yourself. Okay. If you're a compulsive shopper, this may not be the one for you, but if you're somebody that's always afraid to spend your money, you don't feel like you deserve good things, this might be a special treat. Make an effort to enjoy something material that you already have, or maybe enjoy it in a new way. Remodel or rearrange a room to make it more enjoyable. Get something that'll make a room more enjoyable or present. And get rid of things you no longer need. Well, that could be a big risk, right? Sometimes it's hard to let go, but sometimes you donate it or you sell it, and then you realize you don't even miss it. If you weren't using it, sometimes it's just out of sight, out of mind. Okay, spiritual risks. So taking up meditation, or a prayer group. Meditation is so simple to do if you're just willing to do it. And it can be really life-changing and enriching, for sure. I'll say for personal experience. Even apps out there to help you, such as my favorite, the Insight Timer app. Participate in a spiritual or religious community in a new way. Explore spiritual reading material. I do that personally. It helps a lot. It's very nice to read something that's kind of spiritual and soothing and good enriching for your soul. Go on a retreat, visit temples, synagogues, churches, or mosques, if you're so inclined. Challenge your spiritual beliefs or even expand them, right? Learn new spiritual ideas, and you'll definitely see things differently. Explore an unfamiliar religion or spiritual path. And sometimes when you do that, believe it or not, you really see a lot of similarities. It's like there's many paths up the mountain, and people are just coming at it from different cultures and angles, but a lot of the ideas are much more similar than different. And discuss spirituality with a friend or family member if they're interested. Okay. All right, then psychological risks. Okay, what if you go to a challenging workshop that kind of challenges you in a psychological way, gets you to see or feel things in a new way? Join a therapy group or try couples therapy if you're interested, if you're able to afford it. Even I would say like a 12-step meeting or some kind of a support group that's no cost to you. Volunteer for something that could challenge you psychologically, such as Big Brother, Big Sister. What if you were to be a mentor to somebody? That could be a challenge, right? A food bank, outreach for senior citizens or even offenders. Journal about your psychological successes and challenges. Putting it on paper gives you a whole new perspective sometimes, or even writing a memoir, reflecting back on your life and putting it into a narrative could be very healing sometimes. All right, well, so that was a lot of categories. I know that took a little bit of time there. So now we're gonna make it a little bit more simplistic. So based on those categories and some of the things we just went over, keeping some of that stuff in mind, we're gonna practice taking risks in a general way with a high arousal challenge. So we're gonna try to do something that brings our arousal up and makes us have to focus on that and cope with that, without getting too out of control. So maybe I'm speaking up in a meeting at work, or I'll flirt with somebody appropriately, pursue a passion for hip hop, go to a French language meetup, or this is some examples they had in the book, but it could obviously be other things. So describe one way this week you could challenge yourself at the upper edge of your window, all right? Then actually try it and describe what you did and how people responded. So notice, what's it like when you're doing something new, and how do people react to you? And then describe how it impacted your building blocks. So you can even compare this to when we thought of a high arousal challenge from the past. Is it a similar building block reaction now? Okay, then similarly, we're going to practice taking risks with a low arousal challenge. So maybe relaxing more than usual, such as taking time off work to take a nap in the afternoon. If that's something you don't normally do, if you play hooky from work all the time, this may not be your recommended challenge. Go to a meditation group, get a massage, do nothing when you normally are busy, snuggle with your kid or maybe a pet, turn off your computer and phone for a day, or let someone else take care of you. So think about maybe one way you could challenge your window at the lower end this week, try it out, see how you feel, how other people respond to you, and how it impacts your building blocks. All right, so just wanted to let you know, in case you're interested, I have a couple other related videos about, trying new things related to that, kind of similar to this, but from a radically open DBT point of view. So if you want to look in my channel, Lesson 5, Engaging in Novel Behavior, is about introducing new things, and there's a little bit of a different spin on it. And then also practicing self-inquiry after new experience. So after you try out the new thing, it's like a series of questions you could ask yourself to help reflect on the experience. So those two might be great companion videos to this one, if you're interested. All right. Okay, so we made it through 35. So thanks for joining me again, and I'll be back soon for the wrap-up video for the moving forward section. So until then, take care, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye guys.